done. Oh, wait.
Thank you for accepting our paper on towards big religious data. The paper today will be given by Federico and myself. Sarah and Francesca unfortunately can't make it to the recording as they have both babies of 2 and 6 weeks, and it was impossible to find a meeting with the four of us. Big religious data or big data is a terminology that is very popular and became very popular in the past years. But we would like to focus on what could this mean for religious studies. Next slide, please. What is big data? There are several definitions of what big data is, but the most prominent definition of big data comes from Gardner, who defined big data first with the 3 V's, later with the 4 V's that stand for volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. Volume is simply the sheer amount of massive data. Velocity is the analysis of streaming data, of new data. Variety comes with the aspect of different formats with heterogeneous data. And veracity, of course, with the uncertainty of data. Where does the data come from? How reliable are the data? And things like this. So why do we need, next slide, please. Why do we need a discussion on big data in the context of religious studies? And even if these numbers and equations might look rather nasty from scratch, there's a very important message behind. And for this analysis, for this justification, I would like to start with textual data. This is a main data type in religious studies. If we work on textual data, and let's now assume in a thought experiment would integrate all the data available we have on religious studies, in one big corpus, and we compile a word list and look at the frequencies of the words in the word list. About half of these words occur only once. There are a few function words like of, that in English that occur way more frequent, the function words, but about half of the words occur only once. This is listed in the table 1 in the first row with the frequency of f. Equation 1 is a kind of a standard formula describing the so-called Zipf's law. We described in the paper, especially what is different variables and especially alpha mean and how do they react to each other. This is what I would like to skip for the talk itself here today. What is important is what you can derive from Zipf's law, equation 1, that is equation 2. And this is what describes the ratio of how many words to a given frequency, the number of occurrences, you would expect as a proportion. So for a frequency of 1, one would expect 1 divided by 1 times, in brackets, 1 plus 1, that is in the end a half. If you do this for 2, we would get something like 1 divided by 2 times 3, so around about 1/6. If we sum this up, and this is what we see in the table, we see how many words accumulating occur, for example, 10 times and less. So if we go in the table 1 and we look in the row 10, then we see that about 90% of the words occur 10 times and less. And this is what we call the 90-10 rule. So big data are not only important for manual work in having as much as possible resources digitally available, but it's also important for any kind of textual analysis, as learning from 3-4 occurrences. Anything with textual analysis is nearly impossible. So the more, the better we find occurrences, the better is the quality of all the automatic textual analysis. Next slide.
Yeah. I will step in for this slide and focus a bit more on the what it means to deal with types of data in religious studies. Because of the domain, we can say that in religious studies, data is methodologically variegated, and field itself is methodologically interdisciplinary. Indeed, we have to deal with different approaches that go through sociology, psychology, etc. To these approaches correspond a great variety of data. We can see, we can have audio recordings, bibliographies, pictures, databases, but also geographical data, like data for sanctuaries, measurements, sacred location, and etc. But of course, the most important and the first thing we think about when we deal with religious data are, as Marco just said, textual data, because, well, they often have a normative value for many religions, past and present. So what we have to deal with is a great variety of data with a focus on text, a text that can be in different materials, can be written on stone, can be written on parchment, but in different languages, as we see in the image here. Text and data that have to be dealt with through the use of appropriate tools, which, depending on the data, can be interviews, maps, simulations, especially for objects, an appropriate software development, and also the building of text corpora and the like. This poses a lot of challenges. Challenges that are due to physical reasons. As you can see, we can have the destruction of or loss of manuscripts or icons. This can be deliberate or just due to the course of time. But it is something that especially affects religious studies for a variety of reasons on which I will not dwell here. There can also be the issue of incomplete digitization of what data is actually available. And this can be due to the difficulty of reaching the data, or also to property and market-driven restrictions. The data could be there, could be digitized, but it is beyond a paywall that cannot be overcome by my research institution, for instance. Also, given the variety of data we describe, we have a lack of specialized tools to deal with such a variegated data, often relating to rare languages, sometimes living, sometimes dead languages. Finally, as you can see, data can easily be fragmented, either because of its nature or just because they come from very different research initiatives that go in different platforms, and without an infrastructure that can put this all together, the data remains fragmented and very difficult to use and to re-employ in the research. And I will go to the next slide here.
So what would be then big data for the humanities, or as we call it, the big humanities data? For this purpose, we want to introduce a DESIRE principle on this slide. DESIRE is an abbreviation standing for diversity of language, or the diversity of the meaning of our data. So we work on data that are covering several languages, often very rare, and even less standardized than, for example, on modern languages. The E stands for evolution of historical records. So if you have a concept, today concept of building, it might be a different meaning 2000 years ago. And the evolution of meanings, both of words in the text, but also of functions in architecture change significantly. there's often a stammer. So data often do not survive from its original, but are copied and copied and copied from each other, though making sure that historical records can be traced back as good as possible to the archetypals with a stammer. Intertextuality or any other interrelation between data, to say in terms of covering the lines of transmission. Reliability, yeah, often it is unclear what is the author, what is the source from, is a source reliable, or is it just an own view, a very own view on a specific event in the past. And last but not least, the E stands for an elaborated interpretation of coming with the point that if you have a concept's meaning for now today, it might differ significantly from the past, and you have to understand first what the meaning of the past might be. Extra, next slide please, to this, what is another big challenge for big humanities data? It's the coexistence of information overload and information poverty at the same time. So big data by its definition leads to a huge amount of data, and this huge amount of data simply gives us a huge overload on information, and that's needs special techniques to select and filter the information. But at the same time, we have, and this is what comes with humanities data, we have an information poverty. Lots of information, both in architecture and data, get lost due to destruction because of big fires, such as in the Library of Alexandria, though data get lost for several reasons. And along these lines, we have only a very fragmented view to the past than a full view that we would have from today's point of view. So we have a coexistence of both information overload and information poverty at the same time. And all of this leads us now to what is big religious data.
Yeah, big religious data is the consequence of what we have discussed so far. So the big data paradigm applied to the desire principle that Marco just expressed, and to the coexistence of these coexisting problems, that is information overload and information poverty. We should not exclude, however, the extra dimension that relates to the normative aspect of many texts, of which we discussed a bit before, such as, for instance, the Bible, the Quran, and many more. They have a normative implication which has a consequence also on the living aspects of religion, and they have a great quantity of data within them, and a great quantity of possible variations of data along the desire principles that we discussed. So basically, how can we ensure that the issue of big religious data is properly dealt with? Well, here is where resilience comes into play. What we need and what we are developing is a unique and interdisciplinary, invigorating research infrastructure for all religious studies. Something that can face this issue and bring all the problems together towards a solution. What is needed is to provide tools, platforms, things that can help to coordinate and overcome this information overload and the loss of information. And this is where resilience steps in. And as we go towards the conclusion, I would go to the next slide.
Yeah. Resilience in itself is a research infrastructure with an overall volume of 318 million euro, and 80% of this are in-kind contributions by the member countries. So we have a lot of access to all the physical access, not just to digital material, but also the physical access. And the intention is to run resilience for 35 years, starting from September 2021. There are already 13 partners from 8 European member states countries and 3 associated members. And of course, as for any other ERIC, resilience is free to join for other countries and interested people. Next slide, please. The overall timeline for resilience as an ecosystem to ensure big religious data is that we finished this year our design phase, and by next year we are preparing the S3 roadmap in terms of proper plannings on fair data management. Between 2026 and 2023, the implementation phase will begin. This not means that we have not done anything. Actually, we begin already to provide services and checking the infrastructure in our HPCs. And if there's an interest, we can already you can already contact us now, and to ensure that you can get a virtual machine, for example, to make sure that your data do not get lost. Being really operative will be done at the latest by 2034 for all services, and we will run in total for 20 years, and having a termination phase between 2054 and 2055 when resilience is expected to terminate. Next slide, please. So what is our service? We have a couple of services in our offer, the enhancing services that are aiming at supporting researchers from religious studies in working with digital tools and enriching own data. The enabling services that are kind of core services that can be also used outside of resilience in own platforms, such as unique identifiers, support for multilingual support for data and things like this. We come with a proper research data management plan. And last but not least, of course, the data center to ensure that projects, PhD projects and smaller projects, those typical 3 years projects that can upload the data if they want in the resilience ecosystem to ensure that the data do not get lost. So one of resilience strong mission statements is to ensure that the long tail of data, smaller data, do not get lost, that were conducted during PhD projects or smaller funded projects that typically get lost after the project is finished. Next slide. So we are happy to stay in contact with you. We are on Facebook. We have all the newsletters. Please join our newsletter if you're interested for more. We have social media accounts on feedback on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. And if you're interested in giving us feedback, we are very, very welcome to receive your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.